So we're going to try to see what we can draw out from chapter 10 tonight. And I compiled those 41 seconds, I believe, video, right? Um, I left out any info because one of the questions we're going to try to answer tonight is why did God punish these watchers so severely? Why did God punish them so severely? And hopefully, this chapter will tell us the answer, and that video that I sent up would help us to understand the answer to the question why did God punish them so severely? Because of what they share with humanity that they were not supposed to share. We talked about this last Wednesday night, right? The term that was used by Enoch here is eternal mysteries, heavenly secrets that were not supposed to be known by humanity, right? So in chapter 10, it begins by saying, Then said the Most High, the Holy and Great One, spoke, and sent Uriel to the son of Lamech, and said to him, Interesting. If you compare the sequence of the names of these four archangels from chapter 9, verse 1, and you compare the assignment that God gave the same four archangels in chapter 10. Did you notice that? In verse 1 of chapter 9, it begins with Michael, who is like God, followed by Uriel. God is light, illumination, enlightenment. Raphael, God who heals. Gabriel, God is power, or God who pronounces and proclaims when it comes to messages and what have you. But notice right here, now God is going to act through the same four archangels that we talked about last Monday night. They were wondering among themselves, is Yahweh, is the Most High God, the Holy and Great One, is going to do anything? He is. He's going to give them the responsibility. And it begins with Uriel, the light of God, because this is how God is going to begin to open the mind of humanity. The son of Lamech, which in verse 2 is directly called or mentioned, identified as Noah. Noah means rest, right? Noah means rest. So now, after all the damage, after all the destruction that these fallen angels and the Nephilim, the hybrid that they created, the killing of mankind, the eating of mankind, the drinking of mankind's blood. In this chapter, you're going to see some terminology being repeated: unrighteousness, defilement, sin, blah, 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 blah. Those are reference to the damage and the destruction. Now, God is going to task the same four archangels to deal with the watchers, to punish them, and at the same time, bring about the necessary healing out of that. So it must begin, according to verse 1, with the enlightenment from God, with the light of God, with the illumination from God to understand His plan, His purpose, His promises. So far, so good in verse 1. So notice the sequence of the names of the four archangels. As I always say, everything in the Bible or in this book is penned down the way that it is for a reason. If you look forward to the sequence of these four names of this archangel, it begins with the light of God, enlightenment, and follows by healing, followed by message from God, Gabriel in verse 9, followed by who is like God. So it's a complete cycle. If you go from verse 1 of chapter 9, Michael, Uriel, Raphael, Gabriel, and you connect the same four names of the archangel in chapter 10. It begins with Michael and it ends with Michael. There is none who is like God. That's the main thought. From verse 9, chapter 9, verse 1, chapter 9, to verse 11, chapter 10. Michael to Michael, no other gods are like the biblical God, the God that Enoch become his witness of. We're going to talk about some of these gods, the pictures that I sent you. The how many here have heard or read the Apkalu? Apkalu. Everybody gets the picture. The half fish, half man, half bird, half man. Ananuki, better known also as Ananuki. You probably heard of it. There's a very popular things, right? We'll talk more about that when we get there. So now in verse 2, it says specifically God speaking to Uriel, sending him to Noah. Tell him, in my name. Who else teaches us about using that phrase in the New Testament?
Jesus.
Yes. So, what are the coincidences? We have the first mention of this phrase, in my name, spoken by Yahweh himself to Uriel, sending him to Noah with a specific message. And Jesus Christ uses the same phraseology in the New Testament as the Son of God. By the way, has it ever occurred to you by now? All these stories about the fallen angels, Ananukis, Watchers, Nephilims, Apkalus. Now, if those cultures didn't have these customs and tradition, we're going to have a hard time processing God becoming man like Jesus Christ. Is that making sense? If those culture, the Sumerian, the Mesopotamians, the Akkadians, the Babylonians, the Egyptian, they didn't have the existing myth, fables, folklores about God coming from another dimension, another realm, being one of them, or a hybrid or some kind, a mixture of God and human being, you and I are going to have a hard time believing that God can become a man in the person of Jesus Christ. The same thing, the same principle with all those animal sacrifices that Yahweh was teaching his people. Decade after decade, millennium after millennium, to prepare their mindset to eventually receive this theology. I'm going to send my son as one of you humans, and he's going to die as the sacrifice, ultimate, one and only for your sin. So that speaks to you and I the patience, the long suffering of God, the wisdom, the sovereignty, and the love of God. He knows our mind cannot comprehend his thought the way that his thought need to be understood. So he's buying time, even when it comes to animal sacrifices, even when it comes to the watchers, the Nephilims, the Apkalus, right? Bill? Good? So it says that here, hide thyself, reveal to him the end that is approaching, that the whole earth, these two words are very important because there's a bunch of liberal theologians out there to this very day. They are contesting that the deluge only happened to an isolated geographical region. It says right here, the whole earth. I see Sean shaking his head, but that's the truth, Sean.
Yeah, I can't believe people want to make up their own stories.
Yes,
And it's like what you said about the sacrifices and all that over time, all that attempt to convince them did nothing, you know?
yes. Isn't that kind of ironic, paradoxical, even to the point of oxymoronic? They would not believe that God can become man as a sacrifice for the redemption and atonement of man's own sin, and yet mankind sacrifice other human beings.
Hmm.
How do you explain that? Right? But it pays for us to be very, very observant when it comes to reading the Bible. It says, I hear the whole earth will be destroyed. And a deluge. Now, it doesn't get any more succinct than the use of this word deluge. Deluge, the word itself implies a worldwide flooding. Nothing is spared, nothing escapes, everybody will die. It's as sufficient as succinct as the use of these three words, the whole earth, deluge. And it's repeated again, about to come upon the whole earth. And it's repeated again, will destroy all that is on it. Very straightforward, very simple, very succinct. There should be no confusion in interpreting this, right? Verse 3, now instruct him that he may escape and his seed may be preserved for all generation of the world. Here is the first mention of this very important word, zerah, seed. That is, the theology of it has been repeated beginning from this right here to Abraham. When God promised Abraham, look at the stars, he said, count the stars. As numerous as the stars are in the sky, as numerous are the sands on the seashore, that's how I'm going to bless you with your descendants. But out of it, out of that continuum of his generations and descendants, will come one seed, singular. Did you notice that? Seed, singular, not plural. So the idea, the theology of seed from here moves forward to Abraham, Isaac, right? Move forward to David, Samuel. God promised you will always have one descendant, one seed that will be sitting on your throne. You and I, looking back after the fact in light of the New Testament, we know who this seed refers to: Jesus Christ. So, do you think by now you're convinced that this book contains a lot of theology, though they may not be directly identified? But if you spend enough time reading the Bible, you should automatically connect all these dots. You should automatically connect. Sean?
I love all the stuff you send and the different rabbit trails I end up on because of it. And
Mm-hmm.
like I thought it was so cool in the Jubilees 524 about the openings of the sources of the great deep, the seven floodgates and stuff like that. All the different stuff I was reading today was pretty amazing stuff. I thought
Yes.
it was really cool.
And that word floodgates, right? That's referring to the underneath, anything below the earth. Now, I always say to you guys, on earth as it is in heaven. So whatever is on earth, there's a counterpart of it to heaven. So the seven floodgates right there. Remember I mentioned about seven
Seven
gates of
mountains.
heaven, right? There's the gate of tear. You see what I mean? If you just challenge yourself to do a lot more reading and researching, it will bring everything will come together for you like a big tapestry. And that's our job in studying a book like this. Step back, look from a 60,000 feet, then go dive in, dissect it, and come back out, and you're going to see everything fits just the way it should be. Where there is this discrepancy, then we need to ask ourselves the question: did we go on the wrong rabbit trail,
Well,
Stephen?
well, for me, I mean, just the fact that you mentioned the word Ananuki to me today was something I heard when I was 14 years old in Boy Scouts when we were playing that you leave the guy in the woods thing. I heard of Ananuki, and then to find out that witches and their potions and all of that came from all these herbs and stuff like that. So it's more of an enlightenment for me than a 40,000 foot view. It's just like the windows being open and a wind's blowing in.
Yes, the truth of the matter is the Anunnakis, the Titans, the Nephilims, the Apkalus, those are all the same thing, just different culture identifying it with different names. Our job is to trace them all the way back as far as we can to see which one starts which one. Did Enoch start with the Nephilim, or the Anunnaki starts the Apkalus, or the Enki, the Sumerian god called Enki, right? And you're going to be surprised. You're going to be surprised that everything goes right back to the book of Enoch. So,
You know what's so cool is the mysteries too, as you're reading, like it talks about the water going back down through the gates when the water was subsiding, like where does it go? And just all those things that your mind thinks about as you're reading this stuff. I mean, because the gates above in the firmament opened, and then also it came from below, and then obviously some of it would have to go back to the firmament, and then some of it would go down into the wherever it goes. You know what I mean? So I don't know. That
yes,
stuff is also cool to me to think about.
yes. When we get to the flat disk earth, you're going to see exactly where Enoch was coming from, and the Bible will support Enoch's position on that flat disk earth, because underneath the four pillars that support the earth is nothing but water. It's hard for your mind and my mind to imagine, to comprehend, to understand. But it really comes down to, do you really have to see it to believe it?
I talked about it many times. I mean, how many things that we imagine we see are just an illusion anyway? You know what I mean? It's like I think I was talking to maybe Bill about this, but like when I die, I'll speak for myself. When I die, everything will be gone.
Yeah,
There won't be anything left because this is once I'm gone, it's all gone, at least to me, right? And the same goes for each of us. It's all, I mean, how much of everything is an illusion? It's like, who knows? We don't know, you
it
know.
is. And later on, if not tonight, when we get to the point of sound, vibration, magnetism,
Mhm.
reality, you're going to see why Genesis begins by Moses telling you and I, God spoke everything into existence. He did not do or perform any work. He just spoke everything into existence. Right? So it says in verse 3 right here, now instruct him that he may escape and his seed may be preserved for all the generations of the world. How can one seed does this for all the generations of the world? That's the question we need to ask ourselves. One seed, singular, his seed, may be preserved for all generations of the world. Now, you and I looking back after the New Testament, especially from the Gospel of John, when he says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. There is nothing that has been created that is not created by him, with him, for him. Now, everything makes sense. As Adam was the first, so to speak, man, symbolic of collective humanity, but because of his sin, he gave the legal rights to be stewards of a creation to Satan. So Jesus must become the second Adam to undo what the first Adam did. That's the way God works. He's a God of cycle. Either it goes forward or goes backward in the sense, for example, Adam as the first symbolic collectively of humanity and Jesus as the second Adam. Jesus came to undo. You and I, who are Christian, you and I have been given this opportunity to start something that is good, something that is honoring and glorifying God. And if you keep on in that direction, you're going to bring about a new generation that is free and clear of your own contaminated, genetically passed down sin. That's the whole idea. This is why the order right here, Uriel, enlightenment from God. We've just got some enlightenment right here. all the generation. For example, if you go to Genesis chapter 6, verses 11 to 22, I give you all the biblical references right there. By now, you realize that all those biblical references, they reinforce what's in this book. They do not contradict, they support, they substantiate, they reinforce one way or another. Now, having got this enlightenment, how God is going to deal with the watchers and the damage and the destruction that they've done, now God is preparing to heal humanity, to heal creation. Did you get that, Sean?
I want to ask a really big question that I've been thinking about and been a little afraid to ask, really. And it's okay. So when the flood came, the flood was to get rid of all of the Nephilim and stuff. And but how come when God sent the flood like that, it's almost as if some of the genes were allowed to escape through the daughters, I'm sorry, the wives.
Mhm.
You understand what I'm saying? Now
Yes.
why is that? You know what I mean? But I know it's written, like even in I think it's Isaiah, or where were we talking about where it was written that they'll be there before and after. So
Yes.
it was meant to be that way, but why do you think that occurred like that?
It's very simple, right? If you didn't study the book of Enoch, you're going to be conditioned to believe that you and I are suffering from the sin our own, others, the world, and whatever Satan brings because of the sin of Adam and Eve. This book is giving you a second option in the sense that all the evil and pain and suffering, the origin of that is this coming down of these angels, abandoning their abode, committing this sexual sin that is the genesis and the beginning of all the suffering and the pain. Bill?
That's was going to be my question. Because if I'm reading Enoch, it seems like Azazel was the corrupter of men. He was the one who brought apart sin. He was the one who passed it. I mean,
Yeah.
he's why we sin. He taught us sin. And then he commanded the angels below him to teach us more sin. I mean, he seems like the reason, when I'm reading this.
Yes, you're right on. This is why we have two leaders, Azazel, Samsasha. Azazel is going to be punished by God because of him brainwashing humanity,
Yeah.
invention, weaponry, and what
Weapons,
have you,
everything. Yeah.
that to this day is still causing humanity evil and pain and suffering. Samsasha, on the other hand, his sin that's being called out by God is lasting as a leader, symbolically representing the other 199. His sin being spotlighted by God in this chapter, particularly in verse 11, is having lasted after the daughters of men. So, based on these two leaders, based on how they're being punished by God and spotlighted, it's very clear Enoch is giving you a second reason for the origin and the cause of evil and pain and suffering. Chris or Sean?
I was talking about not the sin part of it, the physical part of it, the part where I thought you said before that the idea was that the genes of the Nephilim were already in the women that got
Yes.
on the boat. So I'm talking about that part of it, allowing those genes to, because supposedly like the Nephilim, or offspring of Nephilim are here now. Now, if the flood was sent to wipe them out, how did those genes, why did God, let me say that, why did God let those genes escape in the women is the part I don't understand.
So I can give you two answers to your question. Number one,
Good question.
because Adam knew there will be two judgments from God. The first one is with water, The second one is with fire. So is it possible that God allowed the women, the daughter-in-law of Noah, to already have been contaminated prior to them entering into the ark, so that that second judgment with the fire will come about? That's one possible reason or answer. The other one simply is this. You and I, including all those three daughter-in-laws of Noah, has been given by God, just as the angels, this self-will. And the Bible, throughout, the theology of sin from Genesis to Revelation is very simple. If you don't repent, God is going to let that sin matures, then he'll punish.
I like that answer. That sounds good to me.
Yeah,
But you
yeah.
know what I'm talking about? It was obviously all part of the plan because, I mean, is it in Genesis where they talk about, that they'll be there before and after as
Yeah,
far as the
Genesis
Nephilim?
6:4.
Right.
Right.
Okay. So, yeah, so it was part of the plan either way, but still, if the flood was to wipe it out, it leaves that question in my mind. So,
Yeah, so those two possible answers that I could think of, right? Chris or Mary Alice?
Chris can go first. He's waiting the longest.
That's all right. Yeah, I thought about that. I think Noah and the family knew exactly what she was, or who they, the females, but God let that, he has to let us exercise our free will. And he knew what was going to happen later on in life. You know what I mean? In our generational whatever we did. But yeah, it's. But I was thinking, my thing is, yeah, the origin of sin was down on earth when they came down, but wasn't the true origin of sin was up there when they left their position? That isn't that the true genesis of sin? When the angels left their position, the lowercase sons of God said basically created anarchy against God directly. I mean, there was nothing else to say that I want to commit sin. Like, my lustful thoughts are sinful, but it's because of an outside experience. They was direct to God. They knew there was nothing else to contaminate them. Wasn't that the original origin of sin? I guess is my question.
Yeah, very interestingly, later on, Enoch's going to identify Azazel as none other than Satan himself.
Hmm.
So then we go back to Revelation chapter 12. There was a war in heaven. Michael and the good angel won the war, kicked out Satan out of heaven. Satan brought down, through his persuasiveness, 1/3 of the angels of heaven. The next story, narrative that follows that is in Genesis chapter 3. He came into the Garden of Eden, God having created Adam and Eve in the form of a serpent. So, yes, the origin of sin is this spiritual being called cherub, according to Ezekiel 28 and Isaiah 14, who, for whatever reason, one day he decided, I will, I will, I will, I will, I will. That led to him being kicked out of heaven, throwing a temper tantrum, brought with him 1/3 of the angels of heaven, which fills in the gaps of Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2, and the surrounding culture, existing culture at the time, for example, the Mesopotamian, the Sumerian, that went back all the way 3 million years, supposedly, according to the scientific calculation, right? They had existing stories such as the Epic of Gilgamesh, which parallels the flood of Noah. Mary Alice?
So my question is, were the daughter-in-laws of Noah, are we saying that they were birthed, that that one of their parents were the Nephilims? Or are we saying that they had an affair with the Nephilims?
I would prefer the second one, that they had an affair with these fallen angels, because the truth of the matter is, it's not like the fallen angels asked the daughters of men, hey, you want to have sex with me? No, They just literally came as men and then took them by force and had sex with them.
Oh, okay. I guess that was the part I missed, that it was by force. I thought they seduced them in a, oh, what's the word you use when it's, I give you permission. It's not force. It's, oh, I can't think of it at the moment.
Seduction. Yeah.
Manipulation.
Yeah, it was like they wooed them. I guess that was the nice word I'm trying to think of. That they wooed them and dated.
When I said the testament of Reuben, if you remember, right? They look at the daughters of man, they're beautiful and comely, and they started thinking about them more and more, more and more. And then the thought came upon them, I want to have them. I want to have sexual relationship with them. So the testament of Reuben tells you and I, eventually they took the form of man, then they came and they took the daughters of man, the women, and then they had sex with them. So in that regard, there's sin. To answer Chris's question, right there, the origin of sin, right? If you just answer the question from the perspective of the angels leaving their abode. Leaving their abode is the most heinous violation. If you look at the word sin as a violation, because for that reason they were created by God as a spiritual being. They are not to ever leave their abode. So that's the beginning of their downfall. Worse than that, the cause and the reason for them leaving their abode is to fulfill this lust that you and I, as human beings, whether men or women, are still going through it every single day, despite the fact that you might have been a Christian for 50, 60, 70 years, right? So there's a lot of little pieces right there. But to answer your question, all the scholarly interpretation of this intrusion of these angels to earth when it comes to the daughters of men, it's that they took them by force as Eve, they raped them. It's not a mutually consented agreement, so to speak, right? So it's a violation in that regard. Bill?
Yeah, I'm just going along with what Chris and Sean said. I mean, am I wrong in saying we're blaming Eve, but Azazel he brought the sin to the earth? That's what I'm thinking. He is the origin of sin. I mean, Eve was Eve was the victim of his, manipulation, but that's when sin came to us through him. He was the one who brought sin down to the world. I mean, even with the DNA, and then I'm going to go farther if I can. God knew the DNA was going to go on. I mean, he knew that the DNA was going to go on the ship. He knew it was going to go with Noah. This was all his plan, to be judged with fire in the end. I mean, it's all coming together slowly, but beautifully. It's not the questions are being answered, and it's good to see. I mean, it's refreshing.
So you have two narratives, right? The fallen angel in the book of Enoch and the serpent in the Garden of Eden in Genesis 3. The connecting link now the book of Enoch is telling us. One of the leaders of this fallen angel, his name is Azazel. Azazel is none other than Satan, who appeared in Genesis chapter 3 in the form of a serpent. Why did he appear to them in the form of a serpent? Well, contextually interpreting, prior to him showing up as a serpent, there is a line right there by Moses that's very revealing. After God created Adam and Eve, what is the first task that God told Adam to do?
Take care of the land.
Name all the animals.
Yeah.
Now that explains to you and I why they communicated with the serpent. You follow what I'm saying? So this is how you piece everything together. So if you isolate the origin of sin according to the book of Enoch, we have two leaders right here. One sin, Azazel sin, is downloading to mankind all these secret mysteries of heaven that he shouldn't. The sin of Samsasha is lusting after the daughters of men. So if you apply that to Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, especially in light of Enoch identifying Ashasha as the same serpent, Satan, in the Garden of Eden. You could say that we are where we are today when it comes to sin, evil, and suffering, not really because of Adam and Eve's sin.
Right.
Frank? Yeah, Frank?
Or would Lucifer be another form of Azazel?
So Lucifer is how we name him, right? So we're talking about names now. So Satan means adversary. Lucifer, if you dig deep into this name Lucifer, it comes from the Latin word Lucien. Lucien means light. The book of Job tells you and I that angels are identified in the book of Job as stars among the many names and phrases. So at one point before his fall, he was a cherub, according to Ezekiel. That's how we identify him as Lucifer, because he was a light that has fallen, which matches what Jesus Christ himself testified. He said, I saw Satan falling like lightning from the sky. So we're talking about names, right there, different names, different contexts, the way that the name is used right there. Nonetheless, they all identify the same entity, which is a spiritual being created by God in charge of all the other angels. For whatever unknown reason, at one moment in time, he decided he wanted to be like God. And ever since, we've been going through this history of redemption. Right? Sean or Bill?
Go ahead, Sean.
I was just going to say, I was wondering if, because I knew that I read something earlier today out of what you asked us to read. And so this would be Enoch chapter 54.
Yes.
I'll start at 4. It says, I asked the angel of peace who went with me, saying, for whom are these chains being prepared? And he said unto me, these are being prepared for the hosts of Azazel, so that they may make them and cast them into the abyss of complete condemnation, and they shall cover their jaws with rough stones. And the Lord of Spirit commanded, and Michael and Gabriel, Raphael, Phanuel shall take hold of them on a great day and cast them on that day into the burning furnace. The Lord of Spirits may take vengeance on them for their unrighteousness in becoming subject to Satan and leading astray those who dwell on earth. Though, is that where we determine that he's Satan in those verses?
That's one of the many verses in the book of Enoch that clearly identifies him as Satan. As a matter of fact, you're going to see the rest of these angels, the rest of these fallen angels, in some portions of the rest of the book of Enoch, they simply identify as Satans, plural. Satans, plural. So the word Satan means adversary. So now they left their abode. They downloaded to mankind secret mysteries of heaven that they shouldn't. So now they become adversaries to God. That's the whole idea. Very simple. There's nothing fancy about that, right?
Well,
Yeah,
that being
Stephen?
said, I know that these women were injected by the fallen ones, but yet the son Ham was the one who went in and castrated his father while he was sleeping. So whatever spirit was amongst his wife, or maybe even bloodline, was somehow instilled in him, right? Because he went and did something terrible as the bloodline son of Noah.
So that's another story about one of the sons of Noah post-flood, after the flood, right? So the story goes, Noah started a vineyard. He had a little bit to drink. He got drunk. And the story says that Ham And the other two sons went in there, but the other two sons showed respect to Noah. They walked back out of the room, not looking at their naked father. Ham, on the other hand, the rabbinical tradition says that Ham went in there and he castrated his own father. So the evil that he did may have been the genesis of him being evil that he was and his descendants. So that's a separate story.
Right.
I don't know how we can link that to what we're talking about right here.
I was just thinking because it was his wife, maybe he was exposed to the spirit of just the evilness like us, the duality, the evil that's in us.
Yeah. So again, I don't see any connection between the evil that Ham did to his own father Noah to what
Okay.
we're talking about here,
All
right?
right. I'm sorry. Yep.
Yeah, it's okay. That's okay. Yeah. So, any other questions before we move forward?
One, if it's okay. We keep saying serpent when I'm thinking of Azazel. I'm, there is not a serpent. I don't know why we even use the word serpent because you told us to look it up. And serpent is like, I think it's Nahash. I
Yes.
think it's pronounced Nahash. And that means shiny, glorious one, which represents an angel of God, which represents one of the sons of God. We keep saying serpent, and it seems like it dumbs us down, like we're children. But when you look up that word, it's like Eve was one of the first ones to be deceived and manipulated to lay down with one of the sons of God. I don't know why we even use the word serpent.
Yeah.
Looking it up, it's like, what? Why are we seeing a snake? Where did that even come in?
So, two answers to your question. Number one, as I said before, the first task God gave Adam was to name the animal. So, having named an animal serpent, that makes the story of the serpent coming to the Garden of Eden a little bit easier to digest. Secondly, to the ancients, the surrounding cultures and tribes, serpent is a symbol of God or gods. Serpent is also a symbol of a healing God. Serpent is also a symbol of wisdom. So we have to take the surrounding cultures, mythology,
Okay,
as in regard to the serpent, why the word serpent in the English translation of the Bible is used there. Just think about it like this, Bill. If that serpent was taken out of the English translation and replace it with something shining, how many people are going to read that? How many people are going to believe that?
I guess that's what I was thinking. That's why the word
Yeah.
serpent was put there.
Yeah.
To make more people understand, or
Yes, the truth of the matter is the word Enoch'S, as you were
that's what it's called. Yeah.
alluding to, right? Correctly translated means something shiny, which matches with what Paul said that the devil himself can appear to you and I as an angel of light. But if you take the word serpent out of any English translation of the Bible and replace it with something shining, how is that going to convince anybody to become a Christian?
We'd screw it up, right?
You follow what I'm saying? But that's a good question because this chapter, right, when it mentioned right here, this is verse 4, Dudael. So it says in verse 4, and again the Lord said to, now we have a different archangel, by the way, Raphael, God who heals. Bind Azazel, hand and foot, cast him into the darkness, make an opening in the desert, which is in Dudael, and cast him there. The mention of this word Dudael demands that you and I study the Apkalus, which is why I sent you all those pictures about those hybrids, half man, half fish, half man, half bird. Why is that? Because the existing story about the Apkalu form the context of the watchers in this book, which becomes this book that you and I are unpacking, the watchers, the first 11 chapter, become an expansion of Genesis 6, verse 1 to verse 4. Look at it like this. If you and I had not been unpacking this book, all that you will understand about Genesis 1:4 is this one single word, Nephilim, which is the offspring of the fallen angel with the daughters of men. But when you study this word Dudael, which basically means a cauldron, like a big pot, big hall, big boiling pot of God, this is associated with the word Tartarus. So in Second Peter chapter 2, verse 4, so when it says that here, bind Azazel, this word bind in Second Peter chapter 2, verse 4, it says, for if God did not spare angels when they sinned. So this is the origin, the genesis, the reference for Peter in the New Testament to be penning down in 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4 about God casting them into hell, the sinning angels, the angels when they sin. So the word casting the sinning angel into hell in the Greek is exactly the word tartaru, translated into English translation of the Bible as tartarus. Tartarus. So what is the connection? The connection simply is this. In classical Greek, when it comes to the Titans, the Titans are the Greek version of the Nephilim. The Titans are the Greek version of the Sumerian Apkallu. The Sumerian Apkallus are semi-god, semi-human beings that have been existing before Noah's flood and after Noah's flood. These are created by a Sumerian god, according to the narrative, called Enki. So 7 of them were sent down by Enki prior to Noah's flood to teach humanity. The only difference between the story of the Nephilim from Genesis, the Watchers from Enoch, and the Apkallu from the Sumerian culture is they were sent by their god Enki to help humanity, which, by the way, later on, sometime in the book of Enoch, that version of the story is also introduced by Enoch. You follow what I'm saying? After the flood, there were only 4 Apkallus left. They eventually became advisors to kings. This is where Gilgamesh entered into the picture as one of the king that was served by these Apkallus. So that's the Sumerian context. And Enoch was fully aware of this because the timeline between the existing Apkallus narrative and Enoch when he was alive, you're looking at about 300 to 400 years separating the two of them, between Enoch and the Apkallus as a narrative from the Sumerian culture. Sean?
So all of this talk about the origin and sin and stuff like that gotten me thinking about this. Is this group of shoot, I gotta take this call. It's actually has to do with comp. I'll be right back. Sorry.
Go. So this is why in a book like Enoch, especially as it regards to the Watchers, we cannot just process it on its own. We have to take into account the surrounding culture, if you want to call it myth, which I don't believe it is a myth. I do believe that those Apkallus existed just as the Nephilims did, just as the Titans did. The idea here is they all connect. They all connect all these dots. And it gives us this picture of why eventually, as we started tonight, right? Why did God have to punish these watchers so severely? Well, we have some evidence from the Apkalus and the succeeding influence of the Apkalus upon the Sumerian, upon the Babylonians, upon the Egyptian, in some of the things that supposedly these Apkalus have taught humanity. In one of the pictures that I sent to you guys, there's a picture of an Apkalu with the head of a bird and the human body. But on the hands, if you notice, there are two important items that Apkalu was holding. One is pine cone. The other one is something on the wrist, which we'll talk more about it when we get there, because those are the invention, those are the technology, those are the downloading of the secret eternal mysteries, heavenly mysteries that these Apkalus, or in this case, in the book of Enoch, the angels, they were not supposed to share with humanity, which eventually lead humanity to utilize those knowledge, not for good, but for evil. Bill?
Yeah, but then when you're describing them, like when you see all Babylonian and Sumerian, all of you could find what you just described scribed on the walls of their caves today.
Yes.
Half man, half bird. You could see it. I mean, it's in museums. It's everywhere, and that correlates with exactly what you were saying.
Yes, which proves the book of Enoch is real.
Yeah.
Which proves why they banned this book. Derek?
So then why do they gloss over that in history? Because obviously, like Bill said,
Yeah,
it's
right.
it's carved on the wall. You can see
It's-
the man with the bird's head. You can
Right.
see the giant man carrying the stones carved in stone. Why do they just gloss over that in history?
Because as I mentioned before, these are the kinds of knowledge that somebody, some organization, some governments, religious, sacred, or secular, do not want humanity to know about it. Because the moment humanity knows about it, their own evil, their own crime, their own whatever you want to fill in the blank, as in regards to them robbing you and I to know this, it eventually is going to expose them. I use the example of the Smithsonian Institute.
Yeah.
Right there.
So does that mean that there's the Nephilim are still roaming the earth in human form, and they're controlling us still with that kind of power?
Yes, as I said before, you're going to hear more and more reports of aliens. You're going to hear more and more reports of UFOs. Just as Atlantis is no longer a myth, there is a society, there is a culture, there is a group of hybrid that's living under the water. So is there a group of hybrid living up there. They all are going to come back, just like Jesus Christ himself says, as in the days of Noah, so shall the coming of the Son of Man will be, which ties in to what Sean was asking on early on about the daughter-in-laws of Noah. Why did God allow them to enter into the ark? Because this omniscient God, who sees millions of years down the road what humanity will do, he already knew what they're going to do. So he's basically saying, okay, I'm going to send you messages after messages, prophets after prophets. This is why the book of Hebrews begins by saying, in time past, God, Yahweh, spoke to you and I through our forefathers. But in these last days, he speaks to you and I through his Son. What is the idea? We are all culminating toward the end of time. These two groups of hybrids are going to be showing up more and more. And when they do form a coalition, and this has a lot to do with the chosen people of God and the nation of Israel. This is when Jesus will show up. The book of Revelation, chapter 13 to chapter 16, tells you and I that all the nations will be deceived, thinking and believing that they could form a coalition to overtake Israel, to overtake Jerusalem, so that they can have a temple there, so they can put their own God there, so they can advance the mark of the beast and force the rest of humanity to take the mark of the beast, or else they're going to die. That's when Jesus will come back. Chris?
Yeah, Paul, I saw your questions earlier, and I was like, it was such a grotesque imbalance of power. Like they showed these miraculous things. They became the God. I mean, how could you not think that though? Really? I mean, me even. If you're living like not even the wheel was invented, and then all of a sudden you have electricity and power and wonders and miracles and these things. How could you not think it was God? I understand how they were. That's how we're going to be fooled by the Antichrist. He's going to create miraculous, divine, crazy miracles, and he's going to create things that are going to make us think he smells, looks, acts, and looks like Jesus. I mean, it's going to be a repetition of what happened in the past, and we know it, but we still are going to be fooled. But
Yes.
one thing, Paul, the Edomites, Edom, they blended into the Jewish culture, and they're not even Jewish, and they're infiltrating the Jewish life. And aren't they going to be a big part of the? Are they part of the Nephilim or the hybrids? And are they just lurking in Israel and Jerusalem, ready to pounce on those poor Jewish people?
That's a good question, right? When the time gets to that point, I'll show you that there are good Jews, there are bad Jews. The Edomites, to answer your question, they were descendants of the Nephilim. This is why I show you a picture of a Rothschild, the
Yeah.
skull elongated compared to the elongated skull of the Nephilim. That is the biological, genetic, physiological evidence of the existing of the Nephilim. You cannot deny that. The elongated skull of the Nephilim and the elongated skull of the Rothschild and a lot of these Jews that are using the blessing of money, finances from God to advance evil and wickedness. These are the descendants of Edomite, and you can trace them all the way back to Ham, as Stephen was asking the question before, right? So again, this is a different narrative right here compared to what Ham did to his father. The whole idea is the Nephilims have been around just as the Apkalus before and after the flood, and they will be around until they get it to their head and to their heart. Let's do exactly what these 200 fallen angels did. And that's when God said, okay, I've been buying you time long enough, perhaps not so much for them, but for you and I, humanity, to not become their accessories to murder, accomplices, but we don't repent. So God said, I'm just going to let it all play out the way it did in Genesis 6. This time around, I'm not going to use water. I'm going to use fire.
Fire, right.
John? Mary Alice?
So just quickly, so were the Edomites also descendants of Esau's?
Edom, Esau, right? We have an example of Herod. Herod was an Edomite.
Yeah.
So
Herod
Esau was the twin brother of Jacob.
Yes.
So their mother was Rachel? No, whose mother was it?
Leah.
Rachel?
Leah.
So
Leah. Okay. So then does that mean that she had the Nephilim in her?
no, we cannot draw that conclusion. So the question that Chris was asking is regarding to some of the Jews including modern day Jews? Are they descendants of the Nephilim? So, from the perspective of the Edomites being the descendants of the Nephilim, the chances are a lot of these Jews that you and I think and believe are good Jews, in reality, they may not be good. And I gave the example of a Rothschild. And the evidence of that is in the elongated scar. But we cannot just assume that their mothers, so to speak, are automatically a Nephilim, right? Because remember this word genitilic? The word genitilic that I used to describe this tribe called the Canaanites. So the Edomites does not just refer to a particular group of people. It can refer to more than one group of people. It's called genitilic. It's a reference. It's a generalized reference of not just one group, but consisting of more than one groups of people that might have resulted from mixed marriages, such as Herod the Great as an Edomite, and what have you, right? John?
Plus, I just want to say to that, plus they could possibly get a smaller or a larger portion of that DNA from the Nephilim, right? Like say if it passed it, you know what I'm saying? How like sometimes you see like a family and they got one child that's extra large kind of thing. You know what I mean? I mean, it
Yes.
could be the same kind of thing where they get like a part, some of it, and some might not get as much. But I apologize for the interruption.
It's okay.
But anyway, what I wanted to ask is, okay, so we're talking about all this original sin stuff and the fallen angels. So are the fallen angels that they talk about with Satan the same as these angels that we're talking about now? Or is it two different groups of angels? Or is it possible that they're the same ones that were the watchers were the same angels that were the group of angels that Lucifer, Satan took with him?
Yeah, so as I explained before, right, to answer why there's a gap between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2, the answer is coming out from Revelation chapter 12. Satan fell and took with him one-third of the angels. So that's the first group of, if you want to call them, fallen angels.
I remember that now.
Yeah, so this is the second group of fallen angels. So back to this verse 4, bind, this word binding, the language of binding is repeated by Peter. You can say that Peter took the idea of what he wrote in 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4 from this verse 4 of this chapter 10, when it says right here, bind Azazel, hand and foot, cast him into the darkness, an opening in the desert. This is where Leviticus chapter 16, this is where Leviticus chapter 16 comes in. And we talk a little bit about this ritual called the scapegoat ritual. Remember? Yom Kippur, they bring two goats. One is named Azazel, scapegoat.
Oh, yeah.
That's the connection when it says right here, the desert. The desert. As a matter of fact, later on, we're going to be introduced with a word in verse 9, bastard. Bastard. So the Dead Sea Scrolls identifies and define this English word bastard in verse 9 as demons. Demons, referring to the disembodied evil spirits of the Nephilim. So back to verse 4, when it says right here, the desert, this gives us the link to this ritual Azazel ritual that goes back to Leviticus chapter 16 when it comes to the Yom Kippur celebration. Now, back to this word Dudael. By the way, the word Apkalu simply means a combination of man, the word Ap means water, Gal means big, Lu man. This is why they're portrayed and depicted as half man and half fish, or half man and half bird. Bill?
Is Azazel first mentioned in Enoch?
Yes.
Okay. So if Azazel is mentioned in Enoch and Yom Kippur is mentioned mentions Azazel, that proves more than anything that this book needs to be studied and taken in. I mean,
Yes.
nowhere else, because it skips a whole timeline, generations. It skips generations. So they sacrifice Azazel. There's 2 rams. No one knows anything about the name Azazel. This is where we find it. I'm liking Monday nights.
This is why, like I said, pay attention to the sequence of the assignment that God gives to these 4 angels. Notice right here who is given the task, the assignment to bind Azazel. Raphael. Raphael means El who heals, God who heals. By the way, this word Azazel, the name Azazel, it comes from 2 words, asas. If you just separate the name Azazel into AC plus EL, right? Asas means to remove. El means power, deity, or God, small letter. When it comes to the name Azazel, it cannot be capital letter G. It has to be small letter G. So if you just translated this name Azazel, remove power, remove. This makes sense. Even the ritual of Azazel, 2 goats, one is given the title unto the Lord. The other one is scapegoat. And they had to remove the scapegoat in the sense that they take that scapegoat onto a cliff going through 10 different stations. Then the last priest that took that Azazel scapegoat, that facing that cliff, his sole duty and responsibility is to push that scapegoat down the cliff. What is the idea? By doing so, the sins of the people were removed. Asas, removed. Bill?
When was the timeline do you know the timeline when this Jewish tradition was started?
So you could look it up the way the Torah begins with Genesis.
Yeah.
Right? So Leviticus is basically a book of ritual laws, hygienic laws, and what have you.
Right.
So you can say maybe 1,000 to 2,000 years separating between Genesis and Leviticus. If you want to put it that way, if you want to really, you could Google this out, as a matter of fact.
Well, that would mean that Enoch, the writings of Enoch were followed up until that time. They were studied and they were taught. Am I wrong thinking that?
No, you're not.
Somehow it disappeared.
You're not. This is why I said in the past, right? Oral tradition. If you remember that we did a teaching and I had made a statement, Jesus himself honored oral tradition. If Jesus honored oral tradition, why wouldn't we? But you and I have been conditioned to believe if it is not written, you shouldn't believe it. You shouldn't put too much weight into it. The Jews are not the only culture that believes in oral tradition. I grew up as a Chinese in oral tradition. So are many of you, when you really look at your background, ethnicity-wise, right? You grew up being told all kinds of stories. That's oral tradition. And it comes back to the question Derek asked before. Why aren't we given the opportunity to know this? Because the more you know about these, the more you become a very powerful and at the same time threat, whether to a government, whether to a church, like the Roman Catholic Church, by the way. They had in their possession a lot of these extra biblical books that they've been holding and keeping all to the time since Constantine incorporated Christianity into his empire. John?
I don't know if we talked about this before. We talked about some of the stuff that I'm not sure. I feel like Chris might have said something about this at some point, but okay, it says And again, the Lord said to Raphael, bind Azazel hand and foot and cast him into the darkness. Make an opening in the desert, etc. Okay, cover it. So now, pretty much that's saying we're burying Satan here, right? But yet he's still wreaking havoc on the earth. So is that because his spirit is allowed to be set free? Is that what's the interpretation or whatever of that?
Yes, that's a great question, right? So, Revelation chapter 12, remember when we unpack the book of Revelation, there are four ways you unpack the book of Revelation. The first one is it already happened. The second one is, which is the most predominant interpretation of the book of Revelation, it's not happening yet, it's about to happen.
Okay.
But if you interpret the Revelation chapter 12 as it's not happening yet, it's about to happen, Revelation chapter 12 does not justify the gap between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2. The best way to interpret Revelation is all of those above. All of those above. Now
Okay,
remember,
so it hasn't that could be for the final, right? You're saying the final
yeah,
time that Satan's history.
we know Satan is not bound right now. Why?
Right.
Because the book of Revelation tells us when that time comes, God is going to send a nameless angel to bind Satan, put him in the pit for 1,000 years. That's when Jesus comes, rule and reign for 1,000 years. So, what is the answer to your question right there? We have to look at this with Satan. In the case of Enoch, the book of Enoch, Enoch identified Azazel as the serpent in the garden. Ezekiel and Isaiah identify Satan as the serpent in the garden. So we have right there a commonality, if you want to put it that way. But the book of Job tells you and I that when God is having his angels and he's having a counseling session, not that God needs that counsel, but that's the way God works. Elohim means counsel, right? So it says that in the book of Enoch that Satan showed up out of nowhere. And the reality of your life and my life tells us he still does that, doesn't he? So those are the kinds of mysteries in the Bible that if we know everything in the Bible to the T, we're not going to believe in God. We're not going to need God. Now, it might sound like a surprise to you. The Jews actually interpret this word Satan as Yetzer Hara. Yetzer Hara simply defined is your innate, inborn, sinful nature and tendency. The Jews consider Satan as God's secret service agent. So we're getting a little bit further right there in the rabbit trail than we need to, right? Because the Bible, as I said before, some of you that I've talked to over the phone, right, you know this. The Bible is not what it seems to be. But a human mind can only comprehend so much. Just imagine if all that you've been told and taught about Satan in the church's circle or through your own personal study, they're nothing like that at all. Satan is your own innate, inborn, sinful nature and tendency, as somebody has brilliantly and cleverly portrayed. The good angel, the bad angel. Derek?
So you're saying the Jews think that Satan is working with God, not against them?
Yes.
Yeah, they also don't believe in hell, many of them.
Yes. This is a different topic. That's a different topic.
That's a big one.
So we don't want to go to that right now. Sufficient for you and I to remember in the back of our mind. There are the good Jews, there are the bad Jews. So the bad Jews naturally will come up with all kinds of theologies, all kinds of religious persuasion in order to convince the rest of humanity that the biblical God either doesn't exist or he exists for the sole purpose of controlling humanity. Back to Genesis chapter 3. Did God really tell you that? Right? Yeah, my hope and prayer. This is why I said when Bill wanted to do this book, I said, pray about it first. Why? As we dig deeper into this book, you're going to be rocked to your core.
Yeah. But I think
Yeah.
beautifully, Paul. I'm actually reading the Bible differently because of Enoch.
Good.
You know, everything seems different. When Israel walked to Egypt for the first time, I'm like, what actually did they see? You know, where
Yeah.
did they see these giants lifting these boulders like boom, like boom? You know,
Good.
what did they actually see? Generated electricity through the pyramids, and I don't know. You know, it's a different realm of my thinking that is unlocked.
It takes maturity to process this book. It takes maturity. Here's a good example, Dudael. Some believe Dudael is a place called Benham Rice in the Philippines. I think I shared a picture with you. Did everybody get that picture about that? The largest caldera. The largest caldera. It's believed to be in a place in the Philippines called the Apolaki Caldera. Apolaki Caldera. Now, the Genesis chapter 2, verse 11, as Sean was quoting early on, it's named Havillah. It's named Havillah. Now, again, this is where, as I said before, it takes maturity to process this Bible. If you're not traditionally told the possibility exists that this word Dudael is not in Israel, you're going to have a hard time accepting that. Because the word Dudael, the name Dudael sounds Jewish, and you automatically gonna say it cannot be outside Israel. But we must take into account what the flood, the deluge did to the topography of the whole wide world. You don't have to look too far, right? If you live by a lake in the summer month, you go over there, right? You see these waves and waves and waves of water coming back, hitting. You know what happened with those rocks? You know what happens with the earth? They erode because of the power contained in their water. The enormous amount of power of the waters slapping, if you want to put it that way, the surface of the earth. Now, you picture that exponentially of a deluge taking place all over the earth. What is the possibility that a nation that at one point, or a city or a state that at one point was at point B, following the deluge, they're somewhere, point F? You follow what I'm saying? If you process this word Dudael from I think I gave it to you right there, D-U-D plus E-L, D-U-D means an opening, like when a volcano erupted. By the time the volcano finished erupting, all you see is this gigantic hole with the burning lava, magna in it. That's the idea of this word Dudael. Interestingly, when you look at verse 5 right here, place him upon rough and jagged rock, cover him with darkness, let him abide there forever, cover his face that he may not see light. And in verse 6 right here, the idea right here with this Dudael is to give you a taste of the lake of fire, which is exactly where the New Testament writers got this idea from. The lake of fire as a specific assigned punishment place from God for Satan and his angels. That's where it comes from right here. Dudael. Now, as I said before, It's up to you whether you want to believe Dudael being Havillah, Genesis 2:11, or Dudael being this Apolaki Caldera found in the Philippines in an area called Benham Rice. Scientists, biblical scholars, historians, archaeologists are still debating and studying a lot of the things that you and I are studying tonight, including this word, Dudael, including the word Havilah. And we don't need to make a big deal out of it in the sense that in this book, sometimes we need to get the big idea. The big idea of chapter 10 is the watchers are being punished by a higher rank of angels called the archangels. And the idea is, when you look at the sequence of the names of the archangel, Uriel, Raphael, Gabriel, Michael, what is the big idea? The big idea is if you live a life of sin unrepented of, such as this 200 fallen angel, the first thing must come to you is a revelation from God. It's an enlightenment from God. It's an illumination of your very sin from God Himself. Until then, you're not going to go to the healing process. Once you get to the healing process, then you become a messenger of God, Gabriel. When you do your duty, responsibility, calling, ministry as the messenger of God faithfully and obediently, you become like God, Michael. So I just summarized chapter 10 to you right here. That's the big picture of chapter 10, right? So as we were talking about in verse 4 and verse 5, the connection between the Leviticus chapter 16 of the scapegoat and the Yom Kippur tradition. And it says right here in verse 6, on the day of great judgment, he shall be cast into the fire. That's the origin of this theology of hell in the New Testament. What do you think the authors of the New Testament get the idea from? Right here. Even Jesus himself alluded to. Bill?
Yeah, it's just funny because whether, even if you're not religious, you see depictions throughout history of, where do we go when we go to hell? We go down. That's where it seems that's the origin of, like you said, just through the verbal history and the stories. This is where it originated. The lake of fire, you see the earth breaking open where they were cast and bound. It's incredible how it's all just piecing together slowly.
Yes. And to go beyond the literal of this phrase, the lake of fire, right? Fire is symbolic of purification. So what is the idea? When you to the exercise of this self-will God gives you to rebel against Him, to reject Him, and unrepentant of, you're going to end up being separated from God for an eternal time in which all you're gonna go through is being purified, being purified, being purified. This is why Jesus teaches about repentance, so that you don't have to be separated from God for eternity. For eternity. Why is this separation? Why is this the casting of Azazel into this lake of fire important? Because without that, there will be no healing to humanity. And we have the parallel in the book of Revelation. He, Satan, would have been bound by a nameless angel for 1,000 years. Revelation 13:16 tells us that. During that same time, when Satan will be bound for 1,000 years, Jesus will rule and reign for 1,000 years, so that whatever happens to humanity, humanity cannot point their finger back to Satan and say, he did it. The way the first 11 chapter of the book of Enoch is telling you and I. There?
So in verse 6, when it says on the day of great judgment, is that great judgment for us, or is that the great judgment for Azazel?
That's the great judgment for every creature of God, humans and angelics.
Okay, so then in verse 5, it says he will be placed there forever. So that makes me think that the great judgment will never come because he's going to be in Dudael forever.
The book of Revelation tells us he will be released for a time being before he finally is bound for 1,000 years. Yeah, so this is where we have to connect the dots, right? It's one of those mysteries, Derek. Now, remember one thing. Sometimes in the English word, such as forever, right? We Western mind, we read this word forever means there is no time limit, right? But sometimes the meaning of a word is dictated by the context of it. Either way, the big picture right here, sometimes what I've learned about studying the Bible, interpreting the Bible, if you get too into the semantics, that's a big word, semantics, you're going to get lost. You're not going to come up with anything. The big idea is, like earlier on, the question was being asked by Sean, right? If the book of Job tells you and I, Satan can appear to God, which means he's not bound, then this book of Enoch is wrong because verse 4 it says, bind Azazel, despite the fact that later chapters of the book Enoch identify Azazel as none other than Satan himself. So sometimes in studying a book, the Bible, or this book, we can do it from a 60,000 point of view, or we can go back in, dissect it word by word. None other than that is we maintain the balancing point. John?
I was thinking before, I didn't say it, but now since you said that, couldn't it also mean that he is actually bound, but because he's limited? So he is bound in a sense because he's only limited to do what God allows, right? I don't know if that could, you know what I mean?
Yeah, he's not omnipresent like God because he's just like you and I. He's a created being. He's a created being. But we have to also remember, right? If we take this word Satan, meaning adversary, he can form, he can appear, he can manifest to you and I in the spirit of Satan. Attitude, perception, mentality. It doesn't necessarily have to appear to you and I today as in the form of a serpent, going back, for example, to the book of Genesis. Even if it's bound right now, we also have to take into account there already is, since his first appearance upon the earth, descendants of Adam and Eve, groups of tribes and ethnicity that through, as I share with you, the simplified form of paganism, the worshiping of ancestors, the worshiping of spirits, animism, paganism. So he already have enough of his sons and daughters of disobedience to influence the rest of humanity without him doing anything. Mary Alice?
So I understand that. I can process what you just said. But the bound and the spirit, I feel like for us that can be manifested. But in Job, he's talking to God. And in the garden, no, not the garden of Gethsemane, but where in the New Testament where he's trying to trick Jesus, he's speaking to God. So I have to believe like that's not, like, we can be fooled because of how it's manifested and not recognize that it's the spirit of Satan. But when he talks to God in Job, it's God. And when he is trying to tempt Jesus into, acknowledging and I can save you and I can give you something to eat, it's Jesus. So I guess that's where I'm confused on the bound, not bound. What is bound? What is not bound?
It's very difficult for our mind to understand how on earth can you bind a spirit like Satan. This is why I said, don't get into the semantics. Because if you get into the semantics of the details of it, you're not going to get anything out of it. Back to the temptation of Christ. When you read that, tell me where it describes the physicality of Satan.
I know.
Yeah.
Nothing. It
Form,
does
nothing.
not describe him having a mouth speaking to Jesus. It does not describe him appearing to Jesus as a man saying that, hey, pointing the finger to the stone to Jesus and said, turn that stone into bread. You follow what I'm saying?
It's all in here.
Yeah.
The last thing that I'll say on it is overall, the big overall arching confusion is, when do semantics matter and when do semantics not matter? Because sometimes we skip over a word because we think it doesn't matter, only to find out that it did matter. Or we focus in on a word that we shouldn't be focusing in on, and vice, you know what I mean? So it's for us that don't have, I guess I'm confused on, I don't know when to focus in on a word and when not to focus in on a word.
Yeah. So very simple. If it means literally, that means it literally.
But
For
how
example,
if it's we were supposed to take it literally, like forever.
okay.
Forever meaning forever.
Okay, so for example, in the book of Psalms, right, we got some psalms that are sung when they are ascending Jerusalem. So he would say they go up to Jerusalem. So we have to interpret that literally, because they were literally going up from a lower region to the temple, where the temple is located in a higher region because of its being on a mountain.
Okay, so you're saying contextually, like look at the
Yes.
big picture contextually, and then that will help us to say, is this a word choice by the author, or is this literally? And let me just follow that up and ask one other question. In Bible versions where there's the red lines, I was always taught that means it's Jesus speaking. Is that something that we can take as literal? Or is that still an oral tradition that might not be true?
Well, let's look at the prodigal son story. Did that really happen? Or was that a story Jesus used to tell or teach a truth or two?
It
So
was a parable.
Exactly. The
But it was
genre.
really saying it. He said those words. We can't change the parable to fit that it was a daughter returning.
Yes. So on the other hand, by now, I hope that everybody here knows, right? The English translations of the Bible, as I always say, has done more damage than good. Because, for example, the word hesed has been translated as mercy, kindness, loving kindness, love. Sometimes there is no English equivalent English word to a Hebrew word. And because of that, the translator just give you and I a big picture. We talked about it yesterday in verse 7 of Ezekiel chapter 19, the fortress. In Hebrew, it actually means that Jehoiachin was raping,
Sex. Yes.
if you want to put it that way, the wives and the concubines of his own brother. But in the English translation, it sounds too dirty, too bad of a word to use. Therefore, they don't translate it that way. The same thing with the word cage. In the Hebrew, it actually means a dog collar. The idea is when Jehoiachin was eventually taken to Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, not himself, but through his order, had one of his soldiers put a dog collar on his neck and he dragged him to Babylon. You follow? So context is one way to determine. The other one is that like I said in the example of the psalm, if it means literally, geographically in that example, then we need to interpret that literally. The beauty of the Bible simply is this: how deep you want to go beyond the literal. I always go by what Paul himself says. The spirit of the letter must trump the letter of the spirit. This is going to take discipline. This is going to take discernment. This is going to take practice. The issue is a lot of Christians, when they read the Bible, they don't want to go beyond the literal. And because of that, there's a whole lot of truth hidden beyond the literal that if we would have the courage, we're going to be blessed. We're going to, John?
I was going to say, if when reading the words of Jesus, if nowhere else, I think it's fairly easy to see when it's like a serious thing that he's saying, something that we need to pay attention to the exact words, you know what I mean? Compared to like a parable or whatever. It's just some of the things come across so, strong and plain and serious, I guess, that it's easy, I feel like, to understand that's, where to take that just the way it says. You know what I mean?
Yes. So let's go back to verse 5, right? Here's a good example. Place upon him rough and jagged rock. So that's literal, right? Can it be interpreted otherwise? No, because it describes the physical, material characteristic of the rocks. Am I right? Now, on the other hand, watch this. Cover him with darkness. How do you cover somebody with darkness? There was no electricity during this time. There was no light switch you can flip on and off. And it gets worse. Let him abide there forever. Cover his face that he may not see light. What is the idea? Right here is a form of literary technique. When you look at the word darkness being contrasted with the word light, the idea is emphasis of the punishment. And add to it the word forever. But we must interpret this word forever not in the duration of time, but in the duration of being covered in darkness, in the duration of abiding in that place of punishment. Now, to the last part right here, cover his face that he may not see light. If you combine that with the prior statement, cover him with darkness, that sounds like redundancy. You already cover him with darkness. How is he going to see light anyway? What's the point of covering his face again that he may not see light? That's redundancy. So what can we conclude? It's an emphasis. It's an emphasis of the punishment that Azazel is about to go through. Now that's regarding Azazel. The application to you and I simply is this. The name Azazel means remove by El, or El is removed. So if you interpret the word El as power, authority, when you rebel against God as a Christian and you don't repent of, your identity as a Christian will be removed. You become an Azazel. You're going to go to the same punishment. May not be a physical place where there is nothing but darkness, but the illumination of the Spirit of God upon your understanding mind is taken away, asas from you, removed from you, to where from that point on, you're going to find yourself, spiritually speaking, in nothing but the darkness of your own mind and your own heart. Is that making sense? Now, I don't know what to tell you. I'm not being funny here, folks. Please don't misunderstand me. When I come here and sit down and open the Bible, those are the kinds of things that just come to me. Sometimes I don't even make the effort. They just come to me.
Yeah, I don't know if this helps, but for me, I approach the Bible like nothing is literal. And there's something deeper and more to everything. I slow it down, read every single word, because sometimes I'll read it and then I'll cross the words and I'm like, no, slow down. And I'll read every word and then it comes alive. But I read it like none of it's literal. And then I get stumbled on the literal parts instead of getting stumbled on the deep revelation and not going down my own rabbit trails.
The moment you approach the study of the Bible with a preconceived understanding, you're not going to come out of it with any revelation.
Thank you, Chris, for saying that. I guess the preconceived notion that I go into it with is kind of because of what I'm learning here is I probably move through things too fast because I want to get through it so I can start lining up stuff in context in how, oh, this ties to this. Oh, I need to get through Genesis and Exodus so I can get to Leviticus to understand Azazel and put that, you know what I mean? It's
Understand.
you get so I got to get through this so that I can line it up, tie it all together and understand where this fits with this. And in doing that, I don't slow down enough because I want to get through it all to tie it together.
Yes, so let me clarify something here. There are two excellent ways academically proven to study the Bible. Inductive Bible study versus deductive Bible study. Don't get fooled with those two big words. Deductive Bible study simply is looking at the Bible from a 60,000 feet. Inductive Bible study is taking apart a passage, sentence by sentence, verse by verse, word by word. Nonetheless, the result of your deductive study and inductive study should harmonize.
Oh, that's good.
So, this is why I always say you have to read this whole book first to get a 60,000 feet idea. Then you read it chapter by chapter to get another layer of a 60,000 feet idea. Then you study verse by verse. Then you study word by word. And by the time you did all of this, everything will harmonize. And you're going to have this conceptual big picture of what the book is, so that when you do the word study, you automatically are going to be in the right path. Bill?
I completely agree with you, Paul. I mean, there's a whole bunch of big words thrown out there, but
Yeah.
I surrender to the Holy Spirit. I surrender. Letting God know, letting the Holy Spirit know that I'm in kindergarten. I want you to guide me. I want you to show me what to read. It's so important to not read this book based upon your own education, your own power. This is what I found in my personal experience. I won't dare come to this without asking the Holy Spirit, without asking the Lord to guide me. I failed already if I don't ask for what to read, what to ask, things that stand out, things like that. I would not understand and follow any of it without trusting in the Holy Spirit, which relies on our walk with Christ and how we live for Christ and how we invite and, we don't impede the Holy Spirit in any way in our day to lead us into tonight. And these are it's just crystal clear and obvious. I mean, this is we have to know this book. To me, we have to know this story. And just one other thing on this, and you could say no to me. I know it's a rabbit trail. I know Lilith plays a role in this somehow. I know I'm using that word, but Lilith plays a role with Azazel. Where this is, for some reason, that has to be known somehow.
Yes. So Lilith was believed to be the first wife of Adam. The first wife was Adam, was not Eve. The first wife was of Adam was Lilith. But Lilith refused to submit under Adam's leadership. And because of that, she rebelled. Because of that, she got kicked out of the Garden of Eden and she turned into this monster spirit. To this day, there are many cultures, there are many traditions, oral or otherwise, some of them are written at that believe that because of what happened to her in the Garden of Eden, kicked out because of her refusal to submit to Adam, she becomes the instigator, the female demon that instigate men, particularly those who are married, for the sole purpose of breaking up their marriages, and she would come to them sexually.
Right, lust.
Sexually tempting the man. So I'm giving you a simplified, summarized story behind this word Lilith. Now, the connection to Lilith is that eventually she was believed to have partnered with some of the bad angels. Some tradition even says that her and Satan himself had sexual intercourse to where another breed of spiritual being is produced. Now, I grew up in a country where 90% of them are Muslims. I also grew up in a country where the natives, if you want to put it that way, they were a combination, a mixture of different ethnicities, but they're into animism, the worship of spirit. They're also into paganism. And I remember growing up, I would be told these stories that at night time, there is a particular female demon that whose soul, so to speak, duty, task, responsibility during nighttime is to look for young men, boys who are still virgins, for the sole purpose of tempting them sexually so that they would lose their virginity. So these are rabbit trails when it comes to answering the questions that Bill was asking. But there is that connection when it comes to Lilith and Satan himself, when it comes to Lilith becoming a bad angel, when it comes to Lilith becoming a female demon, instigating man, particularly those who are in a marriage. Because again, these are the kinds of things that oral tradition, these are oral tradition. Now, the origin of the oral tradition simply is this. When the Jews were exiled, whether into Assyria or Babylon, for the period of 70 years, they adopted the existing Babylonian, Assyrian myth, gods, demons, spirits, you name it. So when Ezra came back with the first batch of the exiles back to Jerusalem and Israel, his task was to revive in them interest in the Torah. That's the origin of oral tradition. This is why we have Talmud, we have Mishnah, we have Midrash. These are all oral tradition in the sense of oral interpretations of the Torah. We then added, enhance personal rabbinic interpretation into it for the sole purpose of reviving the interests of the Jews in the Torah. There is a website called Sefaria, SEFARIA.com. You can log on it. It's a worldwide website. You have all kinds of academians with all their expertise and experience and knowledge when it comes to those oral tradition. It's a good website. I get on it every now and then. But I will say that you must have, at the very least, some basics understanding of Hebrews to get on their website.
Yeah.
Right? So Bill?
But does Isaiah mention? Isn't it all the way to Isaiah though? It's kind of like how we missed Enoch. It's taken out. But then
Yes.
again, in two other books, in Isaiah 34, is that mentioning Lilith? I
Yes.
don't mean to go on this rabbit. I know we're time limited. I don't,
So it's referred to as the owl spirit.
it's screeching owl.
Screeching owl spirit. Yes. Yes, you're right on that. It's mentioned by Isaiah. But notice in the context right there, which is what this word right here, desert. If we go back to verse 4 right here, bind Azazel, hand and foot, cast him into the darkness, make an opening in the desert. So Isaiah in the chapter is talking about a particular group of birds that hang around desert. Desert right there can be literal desert or spiritually discerning, a place where you are alone, apart from God, without God. So it's a spiritual desert. It is right there. And then he mentioned this screeching owl spirit. The association with that was Lilith when she was cast out of the Garden of Eden. Of all the places that she ended up claiming as her domains was the desert, besides the sea. Very good. It's good that you know all these things because as we unpack more and more of the book of Enoch, the things that you have read, whether in the Bible, whether extra biblical source, they should come together, forming this big tapestry. Okay? So far, so good. The rest. Moving on. Where were we? Chapter verse 6, I think, right? On the day of the great judgment, he shall be cast into the fire. Heal the earth, which the angels have corrupted. Proclaim the healing of the earth, that they may heal the plague. Now you see the repetition of the name of God indirectly in this English word heal, because that's exactly the Hebrew word Rapha. This is why this task is given to this archangel Raphael. El who heals, God who heals. So once the watchers are dealt with, in this case the leader, Azazel, then healing can begin. The application of this simply is this. If you still have a sin that you're committing as a lifestyle, God is not going to heal you until you willfully, voluntarily, intentionally sever that connection with that evil, sever that connection with the spirit, with the sin. This is the whole idea of the first 6 right here. 3 times this word heal is used. Heal the earth, the healing of the earth, heal the plague. Why? That all the children of men may not perish through all the secret things that the watchers have disclosed and have taught their sons. So God knew once these secrets were revealed by this angel, there is no telling what humanity would do with the secrets. But up to this point, the best solution is to bind the leader and to allow Raphael, the God who heals as an archangel, to do what he alone can do to bring about the healing so that all the children of men may not perish. This is the wisdom, this is the sovereignty, this is the plan, this is the purpose, this is the promise, this is the law of God for mankind displayed in this verse. You and I are the beneficiary in the sense that we are unpacking this, and Enoch is recording this remember in the beginning of the book, Enoch, he said, what I wrote is not for me and my generation, but for the future generation. You and I are included in this phrase, all the children of men may not perish. Number 1, we don't repeat what this fallen angel did. Number 2, as it regards to Raphael, you have to suffer yourself from that sin, from that spirit, from that conduct, from their behavior. Making sense? There is no any if buts about that. You cannot walk to both sides of the fence. You cannot. You cannot have one foot in, one foot out. It's either all or none at all. That's the way God works. This is why he wiped them out completely, including humanity that had, so to speak, fallen victim to the persuasion of these angels. It says in verse 8, the whole earth, not some, not just an area, has been corrupted to the works that were taught by Azazel. To him ascribe all sin. So now he alone is being finger pointed, put it that way, by God as the sole cause for the corruption throughout the whole earth. And because of that, he must be bound. He must be dealt with. Thank God for the archangel. This is why I say, right, last Monday, these angels are foolish. They forgot. When it comes to the 9 hierarchy of angels, they're at the bottom. They had the audacity to do what they did, thinking and believing that they will get away. God already had a plan. All I have to do, he said, send your supervisor to deal with you. That's exactly what happens in this chapter. Right? We have Uriel, we have Raphael. Now Gabriel is introduced in verse 9. To Gabriel, said the Lord, proceed against the bastards and the reprobates, against the children of fornication, and destroy the children of fornication, and the children of the watchers from amongst men, and cause them to go forth, send them one against the other, that they may destroy each other in battle. For length of days shall they not have. For the first time, the theology of fornication is introduced here. Where do you think the New Testament got this theology of sexual sin called fornication? Right here. Bastard, as I said before, in the Dead Sea Scroll is interpreted as demons, So it says right here, the demons now is Gabriel. Why is that? Because his sole purpose is to send the message. What is the message? The message is not so much for the fallen angel. The message is for you and I. Why is that? What's right here at the end of verse 9? What's going to happen? They're going to kill one another until there is none of them left. In this culture, it is customary to do that. So that's a cultural context. That's a historical context that we must take into account. Because if you don't take into account, you're going to say, wow, Yahweh is cruel. Yahweh is loveless. He's going to let them kill one another till none of them remains. In this culture, it is a customary thing for a conquering king, so to speak, to do what Gabriel was told by God to do. Right? What is the message? The message is in verse 10. The message is not in verse 9. The message is in verse 10. No request that they, for example, their fathers, make of thee shall be granted unto their fathers on their behalf. Why? Because they hope to live an eternal life. But God said, no, because of what you've done, because of this fornication, I'm going to limit your lifespan to 500 years. John?
How could they possibly think that they could do this and it would be okay? You know what I mean?
Right?
I mean, that makes no sense. It's like, really? I mean, you go against God and what, yes, it's all good, no problem. That's baffling.
Think of how many of us, right, especially those that are caught up and consumed into a particular sin as a lifestyle. That's exactly their mentality. They got away once, they got away 3 times, they got away 100 times. They say, hey, God doesn't care, because if he did, he would have done something. You follow what I'm saying? This is why it's very dangerous for us to in this case, the whole idea is don't take this lightly. Don't be like them, thinking and believing they can get away. No, the name, later on we're going to be introduced with another archangel called Phanuel, right? Phanuel means the face of God. What is the idea? I see everything you do. There's nothing that escaped my face. That's the meaning of his name, Phanuel. That's from the word pani. Pani means the face. The face in this case means the presence of God. The presence of God. But notice the mercy of God in verse 10. He still allowed them. He still allowed them a portion of time. 500 years. Did you get that PDF format of the 77 generation that I sent you? If you just take 7 generations out of that 70, so you're left with 70 generation. So imply in the word 70 generation is 7,000 years. If you divide 7,000 years by 500 years, what do you have?
Thinking math, someone else.
14.
14
Yeah.
generation. What is the coincidence? How many generations between Adam and Jesus? Exactly 14. Coincidence? I think not. Everything God does is so detailed, so precise to the T, right? You follow what I'm saying? There is more to this book than what it literally tells you and I. Here's a good example. Even if we interpret this phrase 500 years literally, it has a deeper meaning. It has a deeper meaning when you fit this meaning of this phrase 500 years into the 70 generations. The book of Matthew, the genealogy of Jesus in the book of Matthew tells us Adam to Jesus, three sets of 14 generations. Way back in the chapter 2 of this book, we talk about the 14 trees. Trees being symbolic of humans, generation, humanity, descendants, right? So, what do we have so far? Uriel, Raphael, Gabriel, the last one, Michael. And what is his job? What is his assignment? Dealing with another leader, Samashah, whose sin is to defile themselves by having sex with the daughters of men. Now, think about it for a second. We have the theology of fornication in verse 9. We have an emphasis of immoral sexual sin in verse 11. Why are these two sins, sexual and that, spotlighted back to back in 3 verses by God through Enoch in this chapter? Of all the sins listed in the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, it can be summarized in 2 words: idolatry, immorality. They both involve some sort of sexual immorality. We have an example in the book of Ephesians. The people in the city of Ephesus worshiping the goddess Artemis, day and night, night and day. There was sexual orgies going on, 724. Not just including the female prostitute, temple prostitute, but also male prostitute.
Yeah.
Those two words should never be together. Temple and prostitute. When you have temple prostitutes, there's a red flag. I'm sorry. There should be a red flag.
In the case of Artemis, she was believed to be the goddess of fertility. This is why the sexual acts. So if you're a wife, you couldn't have child, right? So what do? You have sex with a male prostitute in front of this life-size goddess Artemis. If you are a man, you cannot bring child into this world, then you have sex with a female prostitute. This is why sexual acts, orgies, and what have you are always associated with all these goddesses, particularly if they're goddess of fertility. But God look at it as in this case right here. The difference here is these are angels. In the case of Artemis, it's a man-made goddess. It's a man-made goddess. That's the only difference. One is angels in this chapter, in this book. The other one is man-made goddess, Artemis. Remember, if you read Artemis in the book of Acts, it's a beautiful story. Something fell from the sky. It could be a comet. It could be something, a planetary breaking up in the sky, and it fell down, and they picked it up, and they said, here is a goddess coming to visit us from outer space. Let's worship her. Let's make a life-size statue of her. Let's build a temple. Let's worship her. Let's appease her with offerings and sacrifices, and one of the offerings is sexual orgies. Okay? And what's right here, Bill?
I mean, this book is giving us the origins of sin throughout the future. You know, the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Romans. This is where it all comes from. Like this is just getting put together. Every one of them. This is the origin that spread and continued. This is the step one of the sin, basically.
So if you just take the word angel out and replace it with spirit, small letter S, that's the answer. Worshipping angel, worshipping spirit, animism. Remember I said to you, Adam lived up to 960 some years, right? And the tradition during this time is they worship people who live that long. And notice right there, slowly but surely, the length of life decreases from Methuselah, 969, all the way down. Even Enoch, he only lived to 365. And it was a customary during this time and the succeeding cultures, when you live long enough, they look at you as being favored by God, gods, goddesses, and therefore they begin to worship you. That's the origin of relics worshiping. You know about that.
Still going on.
I don't have to explain that to you. Right? So it says I have verse 13, when their sons have slain one another, they have seen the destruction of their beloved ones, bind them for 70 generations in the valley of the earth. Later on in the succeeding chapters, Enoch is going to give a tour to these valleys. It's called the valleys of the earth. It's a valley where all these dead souls, dead spirits were being confined for their final judgment. Till the day of their judgment and of their consummation. Till the judgment that is forever and ever is consummated. So this is the origin, the genesis of the final judgment of the day of the Lord that the book of Revelation talks about. End time, eschatology, end time judgment, eschatology. Everything, there is so many pieces in the Bible that can be put back into this book, or you draw out from this book and connect it to those pieces in the Bible, and they should fit. They should fit. There is no reason for them not to fit. Is that not why this book is banned? Is that not why this book is forbidden? The name Enoch means my witness. So he's given a lot of things that he witnessed. He penned it down for you and I. Is it possible, folks? Is it possible? Enoch knew what you and I are going through right now. There are books yet outside the 66 or whatever the numbers in the Catholic Church's Bible that are still being hidden. They're still being kept. Is it possible Enoch knew this would happen? Chris?
You know, verse 12, when you were talking about this, well, when you were talking about the 7,000 years. Now, I know we're in 5785, bound up for 1,000 years. So you take 1,000 off of that, we're getting close to the 6,000 mark. Did that all correlate? Does that correlate like that?
Absolutely.
Oh, wow, we're close. We're close. And then we added a day on the end of our year for some
Yeah,
reason.
right. Our calendar screwed up.
Yeah, we're not lunar. So I know we can take extra time off of where we are, right?
As a matter of fact,
We're
the Hebrew,
advancing.
as a matter of fact, the Hebrew calendar is off by 1,000 years. So instead of 5785, it should have been 6785 because they took 1,000 years. So we are in the 6 days and 7 day time frame. Are we not in the end time? According to that, we are.
Wow.
So it's not 5785 right now.
It should be 6785. When we get there, I'll show you the proof. There is
I gotta throw my Trump shirt out. I got a brave Trump shirt. It says Trump 5785.
Because later on, when he was given this celestial journey into the planetary, right? He's going to come up with these jubilees after jubilees after jubilees. Then that's when the mathematical calculation will come in for you and I to see, which is exactly what year exactly are we in right now. Aside from the Gregorian calendar, I think I sent you, Bill, the PDF format.
Yeah.
How messed up a Gregorian calendar is. There's so much, right? So it says right here in verse 13, in those days they shall be led off to the abyss of fire. That sounds to me like the lake of fire. Theology of the lake of fire. At the same time, this word abyss is the same word as Tartarus, the deepest of the deepest of the earth, the deepest of the deepest of the earth, and the torment and the prison in which they shall be confined forever. Here's a theology, again, of end time, of the day of the Lord, of the day of judgment, the theology of the lake of fire, right? Whosoever shall be condemned and destroyed will from thenceforth be bound together with them at the end of all generations. So here's a discrepancy in this verse, because the book of Enoch actually give us two possibilities when it comes to this place called the prison, when it comes to this place called the abyss of fire. Are these two places the same thing, the abyss of fire and the prison and the place of torment, or are they two separate places? So later on in the book of Enoch, you're going to see, for example, in chapter 21, 27, I think I have it in your notes right there. Right? So we're not going to get into it too much, but as we get to those chapter 21, 27, 90, you can decide for yourself whether verse 14 is referring to one place of punishment or two separate places, one for the angels, one for humanity. Again, like I said, when we get to there, we'll talk more about it, right? 14, 15, destroy all the spirits of the reprobate, the children of the watcher, because they have wronged mankind. Right there. It does not get any more succinct. In the eyes of Enoch, humanity is going through what it's going through. It's because of what the watchers committed. It's not because of Adam and Eve. It says right here, they have wronged mankind. Yeah?
What's the difference between the spirits of reprobate? What is the difference? Can you explain that? And the children of the watchers.
Yes. So reprobate, another word for reprobate is apostate. Apostate. Apostate and reprobate means you decided you don't want to have anything to do with God, and you go the exact opposite as far as you can to the point of no return. That's what reprobate.
Those are men. That's mankind, physical us. Those are
So
people who turn from God.
it says right here, right? All the spirits of the reprobate, referring to the spirits of the Nephilim, disembodied at that, and the children of the watchers. So the application of this simply is this: your thinking process. Is your thinking process to the point of becoming a reprobate to where anything and everything about God you very quickly, easily, readily to reject and to rebel? This fits with Paul's teaching in the book of Romans, chapter 1. If you read Romans chapter 1, Paul basically is saying the same way these fallen angels, these leading fallen angels are being punished by God. If you don't repent, Paul says in Romans chapter 1, God is going to give it to you, the desire of your heart. By then, you would have become an apostate. By then, you would have become a reprobate. So it has a connotation of your mindset. It has a connotation of your attitude. It has a connotation of your spirit, small letter S.
Wow.
It's a warning, but nonetheless, don't ever think and believe you'll never become a reprobate. I'm not trying to discourage anybody here. The Bible is replete of examples of how somebody started good but ended up being a reprobate, ended up being an apostate. Judas Iscariot is one. Paul himself in his ministry encountered a couple of them. Greek of Greek descent that he had converted, it ended up becoming apostate, reprobate. And when he needed them to help him in his testimony, they all left him. That's what it means, reprobate. And you don't necessarily have to have a tag on your shirt that identifies you as a reprobate. You could be a reprobate and apostate with your head, with your thinking process, with your spirit, small letter S. It's like parents taking their children, going from point A to point B, right? They keep asking, are we there yet? Are we there yet? And you as the driver, you said, we're getting there. 5 minutes later, they say the same thing. Are we there yet? And you tell them, sit down and enjoy your meal. They do sit down, but on the inside, they have that rebellious spirit in them. That's what it means, but it's for reprobate. It says right here, destroy all wrong from the face of the earth and let every evil work come to an end. Now comes the hope.
I know.
Let the plan of righteousness and truth appear. So right here, you have another Genesis, origin of the prophet and the prophetic messages. I always say, if you study the prophetic book, whether major or minor, it will always consist of two elements: judgment and hope.
Yeah.
The idea is, if you repent, you will live through the judgment. You will even experience the promised hope. But if you don't repent, you will never see and experience that hope. It says right here, let the plan of righteousness and truth appear. But look at how this starts. Uriel. the light of God, the illumination, the enlightenment of God. Raphael, the healing of God. Gabriel, the proclamation, the pronouncement of God. What is the pronouncement of God right here? Well, it simply says in verse 10 right here, right? The angels are not going to live forever. What does it mean? The evil and the wickedness that you and I commit, God is not going to let it to last forever. God is going to deal with it. The way God deal with it is given in verse 11, beginning with Michael, in dealing with the leading angel, Semashah. Semashah. And we're given a clue in verse 12, 70 generation, an allusion to eventually the incarnation of Jesus Christ, the 14th generation, that is alluded to in verse 15 with this phrase, the plan of righteousness and truth. Exactly what Ezekiel talked about yesterday in chapter 19, with the analogy illustration of Israel as the branch or the vine. Now everything ties together. And this chapter ends with such a beautiful picture. It says, it shall prove a blessing. Is that not how this book starts? The words of Enoch, the blessing of Enoch, through the words of Enoch, right? What's the repetition of some terminologies right here? Righteousness, truth, joy, verse 16, all the righteous, verse 17, and in verse 17, shall live till they beget thousands of children. That has a reference and allusion to the 1,000-year reign of Jesus Christ when he comes and rules during that 1,000-year reign. All the days of their youth and their old age. And what's this word? Peace, righteousness, and it comes back to this word trees. Shall be planted with trees full of blessing. Do you really, by now, you got the idea God is into trees? That's how Genesis starts. Of all the fruit of the trees in this garden, right? That's how it starts, Genesis, the mention of the word trees. And then this chapter ends with the word trees. And what's the exponential multiplication of the fruitfulness of these trees? Wine in abundance, the seed bearing 1,000, 10 presses of oil. 10 presses of oil. Wine in this culture was considered to be a luxury. Wine is a luxury. 10 presses of oil. So that's basically means abundance, plentifulness. And aside from that, in verse 20, it says here, cleanse the earth from all oppression, all unrighteousness, all sin, all godlessness, all uncleanness. Coming to 21, all defilement, all sin, all punishment, all torment. This is a vision of utopia. This is a vision of the new Jerusalem that is recorded in the last few chapters of the book of Revelation. When the plan of righteousness and truth, Jesus Christ, rules and reigns for the 1,000 year. By then, what is being done in this chapter regarding the punishment of the watcher will be repeated with the final punishment of Satan and all his fallen angels. After he was given an opportunity to be released, according to Revelation chapter 13, to do his last act of evil and wickedness, and then bound by a nameless angel so that Jesus can rule and reign for the 1,000 years. There is hope. That's the whole idea. God is always in charge.
Amen.
He always wins. He always wins. So, to the short 40 seconds video that I sent you right there, right? What does that have to do with this? Simply is this. Is it possible the reason God dealt with this watcher so severely is because of the long-lasting impact of the revelation of the sacred and secret mysteries that they are not to share with mankind, such as building pyramids that seems to you and I modern day as nothing but I mean, if you're not an Egyptian, you're not going to look at pyramid as an Egyptian would. Even the Egyptian had no idea what the pyramids were. The pyramids basically was a grid to connect them from one dimension to another dimension, a ram, a means to connect them from one ram to the other, right? If you look at on the picture that I sent you with one of those Anunnaki, right, having something on their wrist right there, that is like a magnetic device that will create sound. And that sound itself will eventually connect them. That's their way of communication. That's their way of communication with the rest of them. So that's just one reason I personally think and believe that the watchers were punished by God severely because of the technology that the angels imparted upon humanity in the building of the pyramids and the pagodas. If you look at the design of the temple, in light of the video that I sent you, it's very clear that the design of the temple become a circuit board, electric circuit board, for all these hybrids, whether the Apkalus, whether the Nephilim, whether the cyborgs and transhumans that we ourselves created, to connect and to traverse between one dimension, one realm, to another dimension, another realm.
So these realms, they still exist, right?
They do.
I know, and I'm sure they can, and all this witchcraft they show sorcery
Yes.
that they taught us. People are still learning it, picking it up, and teleporting. Or what do they call it? Astro gliding
Astral projection. Yeah.
projection, and it's still alive and well today.
Yes. Quantum physics tells you and I there are 11 dimensions. The Bible proves that. Quantum physics teaches there are 11 dimensions, 11 realms. The Bible proves that. What is the big idea? The big idea is do not be fooled. Just because your eyes do not see this Nephilim, these Apkalus, these Titans, whatever word you want to put it and use it, according to their ethnic, geographical custom and tradition, they are around. They are around. Because eventually science, our science and technology is going to catch up with these technology that these angels had unloaded, uploaded, and released to mankind. Bill?
I mean, yeah, between the realms and the pyramids and all this stuff, I truly believe the reason the Watchers got destroyed and why they're condemned is because they messed with us. They messed with us. They messed with God's creation, made in His image. We're His loved ones. These Watchers toyed with us. That's why the Watchers got what they deserve, and that's why they're going to get what they deserve in the end. I mean, I see it as God's ultimate act of love for humanity. He protects us, big brother, our father, no matter what you want to do. I mean, they toyed with us, and we are His. It's a type of love. It's another love story to me.
Yeah.
He's always watching over us. He's always protecting us. If we have faith, we repent, nothing could come against us.
Yes. So what these angels did besides leaving their abode, besides having sexual intercourse with the daughters of man, is they're sharing all these sacred and secret heavenly mysteries with humanity that they're not supposed to, or put it another way, it wasn't the right time for humanity to know that. So I mentioned about the pyramid. Actually, the pyramid is one of the means, one of the tools for them to send signal, for them to communicate. We had a brilliant scientist by the name of Nikola Tesla. Nikola Tesla, he basically says, if you want to know the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, think in terms of frequency, think in terms of vibration. These three words, energy, frequency, vibrations, are exactly what these angels are sharing with humanity through all those megalithic structures, through all those gizmo, if you want to call it, as in the picture of the one of the Apkalus, one of the Anunnakis wearing the wrist and the cone, the pine cone that he's holding. Now, Chris mentioned about sorcery and witchcraft. Is it no wonder that a lot of witches, a lot of warlocks, when they wear their heads, did it ever come across you why their heads are always in the form of a cone? And think of these terms. We talked about this last Monday a little bit, like pineal gland. Included in the word pineal is the word pine. And in the picture that I share with you, one of these Anunnakis, Apkalus, was holding a pine. Coincidence? I don't think so. Now, talking about energy. Sound creates magnetism. Magnetism is a form of energy. Is it no wonder that Genesis introduced you to this biblical God who created everything by sounding it, speaking it, sounding it, speaking it. That quick 40-second clip right there, I kind of did it in a hurry today, but there is so much into it. If you look at it frame by frame, so to speak, right, and in light of what we shared tonight, it becomes very clear to you and I that there is so much, even in the English Bible, beginning with Genesis, how God created everything by speaking it, sounding it. Back a while ago, I mentioned that eventually there comes a day extinguishing fire will no longer be done with water, but with sound. With sound. Interestingly, sound and magnetism, they both create this torus. That's the word that is used, torus. Torus is a magnetic field that somehow, some way becomes an envelope. So when you speak, out of you, through speaking, you create a magnetic field that not only encapsulates you and envelop you, but the environment around you. Is this no wonder Jesus said, if you have faith of the seed of a mustard seed, say to this mountain, be ye removed, and it shall be removed. Is it possible? There is more than what meets the eye in the teaching of Jesus. That if you speak something, if you sound something, and what you said with such a conviction and faith creates this magnetic field to where it does what your heart believes. I mean, these are the kinds of things that we cannot afford to be narrow-minded just because we've never experienced it. You follow? Let me show with you something else here. Sound. It says right here, Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, August the 5th, 2014. They did an experiment that proves that sound can act as a cloak of invisibility. Is this not why the witches and the warlocks comes up with their mantras? Is this not why the nuns and the monks They devote themselves hours after hours, day and night, in their prayers. Prayers that are specifically said, with specific words, with specific frequency. Early on, Nikola Tesla said, the secret to the universe depends, among other things, energy, frequency, vibration. Is this not why God created everything in 6 days that match exactly with the 6 primary musical tone? Is this not why we have crosses? The American Indians, they believe in this thing called dream catcher. How many of you are familiar with dream catcher? Did you notice right there? It's in a circular form with crosses. By the way, in that short 40-second that I sent you, did you notice that our eyes are shaped, part of our retina, iris, are shaped in the form and shape of cones? These are the kinds of things that when I come across them in my research, right, and I think I shared with some of you, I couldn't wait to share with you. Because we really are living at a time right now. Daniel prophesied there will be a time when knowledge will become so available right now. We're living in that time. But what do we do with this knowledge? That's a question. That's a question we need to ask ourselves. Here's the last one that I'll share with everybody here to make a point why God created everything by speaking it. Sound manifests as a torus. That's a picture, actual picture of a sound that becomes a torus. So just look at it like this. You're in need of healing, and you speak the healing promises of God with such a conviction and faith. And it manifests itself through that faith into this torus of energy, torus of frequency, torus of vibration that completely and totally encapsulates and envelops you. Is this how Jesus healed? The Gospel according to Thomas, among many, is one of the books banned, forbidden. Google it out, read it for yourself. You're going to be blessed, because in the Gospel of Thomas, believed to be the actual words of Jesus in some of the teachings that he gave to Thomas, particularly when it comes to healing. I'm just going to give you one example. In it, Jesus taught and told Thomas, when your heart and what comes out of your mouth becomes one, healing is possible. What he's saying basically is, if you are in need of healing, the first step you must do is to not have any judgment, mental, intellectual judgment upon the condition that you're in. Because the moment you form that judgment, you already are biased yourself. That's the first step, he said. The second step, you need to replace that reality, whatever sickness, illness, with a reality that your heart sees and believes, that is spoken through your mouth. So what you speak through your mouth must match what you believe in your heart. When these two becomes one, it will create that chorus of healing. There is so much, folks. We're barely scratching the surface.
That's deep.
That is very deep. Everything is in the Bible for a reason. Why do you think the nuns and the monks, as I said before, devote themselves hours after hours, day in and day out, saying the same prayers, the same word again and again at a certain frequency, that produce a certain particular vibration? Right?
And Jesus is coming back with spoken word's going to conquer. It's his spoken word that's going to do everything, the destruction on earth.
Well, in the temptation of Christ, he gave us the example. How do you deal with Satan? You don't even have to fight him. You don't have to fight him. Speak the word. Right? See? I hope this has been a blessing to you. What do you think, Bill? There's so much. There's so much, folks, really. I mean, woe unto us if we're quick to say no, if we're quick to rob ourselves of insight, revelation. And as I said before, this book is not for everybody. Just as Ezekiel is not for everybody.
Yeah, but there's so many puzzle pieces that are coming together, little by little, but they're coming together. You know, and they're undeniable. They're coming together. And that means there's going to be more and more and more until it becomes complete. I can see
Yes.
this.
It should. What I just shared with you a little bit right there about the Gospel of Thomas, about Son, about Nikola Tesla, they all tied into this name Raphael.
Mm.
El that heals. How does God heal? Well, I just shared with you some of that right there. Whether from the Gospel of Thomas or from Nikola Tesla or, I mean, you can Google this out yourself, seriously.
Boy, I'm on a Chuck Missler rabbit trail lately. And he summed up something so beautifully at the end of one of his videos. He's like, it's a cosmic war. We humans are the object and the prize. And that summed it up like totally. God wants us for himself, but he gives us free will, and Satan wants to crush us because he hates God. And we're in the middle. Yeah.
We have always been the prize of the battle between God and Satan. Between all those, here's a book you can get, Dr. Manjir Samantha Lawton. You're going to be blessed if you read this book. Everything manifests as a torus shape, including sound. You're going to be blessed if you get this, whether in the PDF format or in the actual physical book, right? And practice it. Practice it, because I truly, truly believe Jesus would not have given us the teaching in Mark 11:23. Say to this mountain, he specifically said that. Say, speak, sound it out of your lungs, the top of your lungs, to the mountain, whatever is the mountain. Be ye removed. He gives us a specific example. He doesn't get any more succinct and specific as that. He wouldn't be telling us something that he doesn't believe work, right? So that's it. That's all I have, Bill. Let's close with the prayer. Sean, there you go. Oh, I think it changes. Yeah. Anyway, shall we close with the prayer, right? Father, we just want to thank you for this opportunity to learn a few more insights, revelation from this chapter. It is so true. We need your enlightenment to see our own sin, to see our own evil and wickedness and the consequences of that upon our body. Only then will you bring about the healing, so that following that we can proclaim the healing, so that others may be drawn to you and make you as their God. And in the meantime, help us by your grace to continue to cooperate with you with open mind, open heart, teachable spirit, so eventually we can become like you. Who is like you, Michael? More importantly, we can be your witness as Enoch was your witness. We ask this in Jesus' name, to the glory, honor, and praise of your holy name, by the leading of you, Holy Spirit. Amen.
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 Wow.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, guys.
Anytime.
Awesome.
I'll see some of you Thursday morning, okay?
Thank you.
God bless.